This video was made possible thanks to our backers on Patreon like Alexi M. Find out more and support the channel by clicking the link below. So, Zambia just held an election, and before we get into the details and the results, let's go through a bit of context. From 1964, when Zambia achieved independence from the United Kingdom, until 1991, Zambia was ruled by Kenneth Kaunda's Socialist United National Independence Party, otherwise known as UNIP. During his rule, Zambia made a lot of money exporting copper, but after the price of copper fell in the 1970s, Zambia racked up huge debts, which it couldn't afford to service. After riots about Kaunda's leadership, he reluctantly agreed to a multi-party election, which he subsequently lost to Frederick Chiluba of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy. After losing the election, Kaunda agreed to a peaceful transfer of power, and Zambia looked like it was becoming one of the first functioning democracies in Africa. The MMD subsequently won the 1996, 2001, 2006 and 2008 elections, but were finally ousted in 2011 by the Patriotic Front, or PF, who were led by Michael Santa. Santa unfortunately died in 2014 and was succeeded by Edgar Lungu, who led the PF into the election on Wednesday. Anyway, it's probably fair to say that the PF, and specifically Lungu, haven't done a great job of running Zambia. From 2001 to 2013, Zambia's GDP per capita grew by about 7% annually, from $400 to $1,900, mostly driven by copper exports. However, a lot of this progress has been reversed under the PF, and pre-COVID, GDP per capita had fallen to about $1,300. This is in large part due to the fact that Lungu's government started seizing privately owned copper mines, which scared off foreign investors. Debt also ballooned in this time, going from about $2 billion in 2010 to about $13 billion in 2020, with Zambia's debt to GDP ratio increasing from 20% in 2010 to about 120% today. And about $3 billion worth of this debt is supposedly owed to China. And that's probably an underestimate. Johns Hopkins University's China-Africa Research Initiative estimates that Zambia has signed some $9.9 billion in loans from China, although not all of that money has been drawn yet, which could take Zambia's real debt total to closer to $20 billion. Add to that, Zambia became the first African country to default on a sovereign debt payment late last year, when it missed a $42.5 million interest payment on some of its dollar-denominated bonds. Lungu's response to this crisis has just been to print more money, which has weakened Zambia's currency and caused massive inflation. And as a result, the latest figures from July indicate that food prices have risen by 33% in a year, the highest inflation rate in 20 years, and Zambians are struggling. According to polling done by a local NGO, 40% of Zambians have been forced to eat less food than before. And another Afrobarometer poll found that 80% of Zambians think that the country is in a bad condition. Corruption has also got worse, with Zambia falling 5 points on the Corruption Perception Index since 2013, with about 20% of Zambians admitting to having to pay bribes in order to receive services like healthcare or education. All of this begs the question, why wasn't Lungu kicked out in 2016? Well, that's partly because things were still going okay back then. But it's also because Lungu's regime arrested opposition leaders and shut down the main independent newspaper when they felt they weren't being friendly enough to the government. Even with all that interference, Lungu only won with 50.35% of the vote, and the United Party for National Development, the main opposition party, led by Hichilema, accused him of last-minute ballot stuffing. When Hichilema asked the Constitutional Court for a recount, the judges, mostly appointed by Mr. Lungu, set a date for the hearing 2 weeks later, and then subsequently threw out the case, citing a constitutional provision that election petitions must be heard within 14 days. Now, it's probably worth noting that both the EU and US approved this election as free and fair, so it probably wasn't a total disaster. But this time round, in 2021, the election was definitely not fair. The election was basically a two-horse race between Hichilema and Lungu. Hichilema is a wealthy businessman who's contested and lost every election since 2006, with varying success. In Zambia, he's known as Bali, which roughly translates to father. He's promised to clamp down on corruption, open serious talks with the IMF about reforms and a loan, as well as acting to win back the trust of foreign investors. When we look at the incumbent though, Afrobarometer data suggests that Lungu, who won by just 0.35% of the vote in 2016, has seen a significant drop in support, with the number of respondents saying that they choose the PMF down to just 44.8% in 2017 and 22.9% in December 2020. With this in mind, analysis conducted by the University of Cape Town suggested that Hichilema would win more than 50% of the vote, entirely avoiding the runoff. At least, these were the predicted results if it was a fair election. However, this election probably wasn't fair, because Lungu did a whole bunch of things to give himself an advantage. He banned Hichilema from campaigning, citing Zambia's third wave of COVID infections, and in June, police even shot at his convoy. Additionally, since 2016, Lungu's regime have arrested 3 political leaders, including Hichilema, who was arrested in 2016 for apparently blocking Lungu's motorcade, for which he spent 4 months in a maximum security jail before the charges were dropped. Lungu also shut down independent media outlets, including Prime TV, the country's largest private TV station, in April 2020. On top of this, he increased subsidies for farmers and promised to write off civil servants' debts, which might sound like fair game in normal politics, but you can't bail out your voters and bureaucrats at the same time as defaulting on your international loans. There were even more shenanigans on the day of the election. The military were deployed to limit disruption. There were occasional reports of ballot rigging.
This is what is happening at Kiama Secondary. One of the taxis has been found with the ballots trying to break up the car, and the owner of the car has been hidden by me.
And according to analysis by NetBlocks, the Zambian government restricted access to WhatsApp, apparently to limit misinformation, before extending the restriction to Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Anyway, exit polling from Open Zambia suggested that Hichilema was ahead with 66% of the vote, although it's worth noting that these results are from just 2% of all polling stations, so take them with a massive pinch of salt. What we do know is that turnout was about 66%, far higher than normal, with long queues at many polling stations. And in part because of that, we probably won't know the official result for a couple of days, but both the turnout and the exit polling bode well for Hichilema. Let us know what you expect to happen next in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more updates on this election and others. As I said at the start, this video was made possible by our Patreon backers. You can join them right now, support the channel, and get a whole bunch of perks like early access to videos, exclusive live events, merch discounts, and more. Find out what you can get and sign up by clicking the link in the description. We really appreciate it.